Welcome to episode 31 of our ComfyUI tutorial series. Today, I will show you some tips and tricks inside ComfyUI that I consider useful to know. If you open ComfyUI, you can go to the manager, and you should already know that clicking on Update ComfyUI updates your version of ComfyUI. Clicking on Update All updates ComfyUI plus the nodes. But did you know that sometimes the manager fails to update to the latest version? If you scroll down on the right, you can see the ComfyUI version and the manager version. The best way to check is by looking at the date to see if it's recent from the last few days. For example, this version is from January 13th. To update ComfyUI manually, go to your ComfyUI folder where you usually have the bat file that starts ComfyUI. There you'll find a folder named Update. Inside, there are 3 files. The first file updates ComfyUI. The second is useful if ComfyUI doesn't start, for example, if you've installed new nodes or dependencies, as this file can sometimes fix that issue. The third file allows you to revert to a stable version of ComfyUI if the updated version has bugs. Open the Update ComfyUI bat file and you'll see something happen on the screen. Press any key to exit, then you can go back and start ComfyUI normally, and it will install the updates. If I go back to the manager now, I can check and see that there is a more recent version from yesterday in my case. Most of the time, the manager works fine, but just in case your ComfyUI doesn't update, it's useful to know you can do it manually. On the bottom left, you have the settings. Here, you'll find an option called New Menu. You can move the new menu to the top or bottom. If you disable it, you'll get the old menu. If you started with episode 1, you might remember that a few episodes ago, we had a different menu, the old one. So if the new menu is disabled, you'll see that old version, which had the settings button here. For a few episodes, I've used the new menu since it's more useful to me, and I have it at the top. Speaking of the top menu, you can see that I have some extra information showing how much memory is used, CPU usage, and the temperature. This gives you an idea of what happens when you use complex workflows. When I run Flux models, it can go up to 100% with video RAM, but I usually just keep an eye on the temperature to avoid overheating. I have a good cooling system, so I've never had a problem with temperature. To activate this extra information on the bar, go to the manager, then the custom nodes manager, and search for crystals. Click the install button. Mine is already installed, but you should see the install option. After that, restart ComfyUI, and it should appear on the bar. If, for some reason, it still doesn't appear, some users have had glitches. In that case, you can go to Settings, change the new menu position to the bottom, then back to the top, and that should force it to appear. You can see here on the top left, I have this bar where I can open multiple workflows at once, just like opening different images in Photoshop. To activate that, go to Settings, then search for Workflow. You'll find an option called Open New Workflow Position, which is usually set to Sidebar, so the workflows open on the left. If you choose this, you'll see it disappear from the top, but I prefer to have it on the top bar, so just choose what works best for you. To add a new node, you can double-click on the canvas. On the left, you'll see a preview of the node, and on the right, you'll see which node pack it belongs to. If it says Comfy Core, it means it comes with ComfyUI. If it has another name, that's the name of a custom node pack installed in your ComfyUI. Once I add a node here, or if you open a workflow from someone else and aren't sure which node pack it came from, here's what I like to do. Go to Settings, search for Badge, and enable the option that shows the node source. If it's set to Show All, it will display information on top of each node, both for ComfyUI and custom nodes. However, I prefer to only see custom nodes, so I select Hide Built-in. When I close the settings, you'll see that the node now has extra text showing which custom node pack it belongs to. For example, if I add another node, it will display the custom node name. But if I add a node that comes with ComfyUI, it doesn't show anything, so I know it's part of ComfyUI. If I open a workflow from episode 3, you can see that all the nodes are ComfyUI nodes because there's no extra information on the top right of the nodes. If I move a node, you can see that the nodes are connected using these links or cables or spaghetti. You can hide these links if you want by using the I button in this menu, but you can also go to Settings and select the Light Graph option where you'll find the link render mode. By default, it's set to spline. If I change it to straight and check the workflow, now you'll see that all the lines are straight. They adjust when you move the nodes, but still remain straight. If I change it to linear, the lines become straight, but will go at an angle from one node to another. The last option, hidden, works just like the option I showed earlier, which hides the links. I'll keep it set to the default, which is spline. If you go to workflows, you have the option to save or export the workflow. If you choose export, you can give it a name, save it somewhere on your hard drive, and send it to others if you want. Alternatively, you can use save or save as to give it a name, and it will be saved in a folder inside ComfyUI. If you go to the workflows sidebar, you can see your saved workflows there. For example, I have some workflows from episode 10. I can copy them, go to the ComfyUI folder, then the users folder, default, and finally workflows. There, you'll see the workflow I just saved. You can also create a folder and place the workflows you want inside it. After that, restart ComfyUI. Once restarted, if I go to workflows, you'll find the folder I added with episode 10, and you can click on a workflow to open it. Just make sure to add only the workflow files, not the images. As you can see, I added an image here, and it can get confusing. If I click on another workflow, it opens in the top bar as well. Also, on the right side of each workflow, there's a bookmark icon. If you click on it, it will add the workflow to the top as a bookmark, making it easy to access your favorites. If you click the bookmark icon again, it will remove it from the bookmarks list. So organize your workflows in folders or use bookmarks for easy access. If I hold the Control key, I can click and drag with the mouse to select multiple nodes. Then, by pressing the Shift key, I can move all those nodes around. But sometimes it's easier to put them into a group. If I right-click on the canvas, I can add a group for the selected nodes. Now I can move the entire group with all the nodes at once. Plus, you'll have access to more options for groups. You can easily rename a group by double-clicking on the title and giving it a name. You can do the same for the node as well, making it easier to remember what each node does. I prefer to leave the original name and maybe add some extra information after it. You can also create a group first and then add your nodes inside it. Let's say I want to rename the first group as text to image and the second one as upscale. Then I can add a node that's part of the RG3 custom node pack called Fast Group Mutter. If you don't have it, make sure you install RG3 first from the manager and custom nodes. This node gives us a switch that lets us mute or deactivate the nodes inside the group, allowing us to build more complex workflows and enable only the parts we want. Let me just add a node inside this group to see how it's disabled. The switch has two options, yes and no. When it's set to yes, it's enabled, and when it's set to no, it's disabled. Right now it shows both groups, but for example, I can right-click on the second group, go to Edit Group, and change the color to red. Now, if I go to the Fast Group Mutter, and in the Properties filter to show only one color that matches this field, I can set it to red. In this switch, I'll now only see the red group. So I can make the switch specific to this group. I can even change the color of the node to red so it matches. If I want, I can make a copy of the node, change the color so it's not confusing, and then go to the properties. For the match color, I can use pale blue, which is the color of default groups. Now, this switch will only show that group. If I remove the match color, it will show both groups again. Lastly, if you modify a workflow and then close it, it will ask if you want to save the workflow. I won't save it in this case. Let's say I run this workflow, and at the end we have the save image node, which saves the image. By default, it has the prefix ComfyUI. The images are saved in the output folder, and you can see here that they have the ComfyUI prefix. However, you can change that to something else. For example, I can change it to robot. Now, when I run the workflow, the prefix for the image will be robot, making it easier to search for certain images. If I hover over it, it suggests other options I can use. For instance, I can add the date in the format year, month, and day. Now, when I run the workflow, the image will have the date included in its name, so I can sort them by date. Alternatively, I can create a folder with that date, and inside that folder, the images will be saved with the prefix IMG. Now, when I run the workflow, I can find the folder with the current date, and inside the images will have the prefix I set in the save node. The first part can also be the folder name. For example, if I want a folder named portrait, I add a / and the text I want in the image prefix like robot. After I run it, I get the portrait folder, and inside the image will have the robot prefix. When you run a workflow, you don't always know exactly what the result will be in terms of composition, colors, etc. So you have to wait until it's done to see what you get. If you're running a large model like Flux, it can take a while. It would be nice to have a preview, right? If you go to the manager, by default, the preview is set to none because it's faster not to show a preview. But you can try different preview methods to see which one works better for your needs. For example, let's choose auto. Now, when I run the workflow, take a look at what happens in the K-sampler. It shows a preview of how the image is being generated before you get the final result. This way, you can have an idea of whether it will work or not. You can run it and even cancel it if you don't like it. For a large model like SDXL, it's probably not worth it since it's already fast, but for other models, the preview can be very useful. In the top left, you have a Q button with a clock that goes backward. It shows everything you've generated so far, including the things you've canceled. You can see all these robots listed there. If I click on the eye icon, I can see a bigger preview of the image, but you can also load the workflow from that image. I can right-click on it and select Load Workflow. This will give me the exact workflow that was used with the same prompt and seed. If I run it, it will generate the exact same robot. Let me go to the manager and disable the preview. But now the second time I run it, I'll get a different robot because the seed was set to randomize. So when you load the workflow for the first time, you can set it to a fixed seed if you want. Then you can play with the settings to get subtle variations of the original robot. When you have a weak video card with low video RAM, sometimes it can crash at the VAE decode node. To help avoid that crash, you can replace it with the VAE decode tiled version instead. This version offers more options, including the ability to reduce the tile size, making it more manageable even on systems with lower video RAM. You can just redo the connections and it should work as a replacement for the original node. By default, it's set to 512 pixels for the tile size, but you can lower it further if your system still crashes. Keep in mind that when it works without crashing, it will take more time to run because it processes multiple smaller tiles instead of one larger tile. When you use a Save Image node, all the images are saved in the output folder. However, you can also use a Preview node to decide which images to save. You can right-click and save the image from the preview. Now, sometimes you generate another image and think, you know what? The image I generated before was better, but is the previous image lost? Actually, no. If you go to your ComfyUI folder, you'll find a folder called temp. This is a temporary folder where all the preview images are saved. For example, if I close ComfyUI, I thought the images would be deleted since it's only a temporary folder, but they're still there. However, when I start ComfyUI, again, the images are deleted. So the temp folder keeps the temporary images like those from previews until you open a new ComfyUI session. In the output folder, you'll find all the images saved using the Save Image node, as well as audio or video files. Everything goes to the output folder. You also have an input folder. Here, for example, you can find the images you've pasted into the Load Image node. If I add a load image node now, it can load an image like this one with the birds. But if I delete those and the pasted folder, then when I add the load image node, there won't be anything there. You can use this arrow to navigate through all the images in that folder. In my case, I only have the example image. Sometimes you need to add notes in the workflow. For example, you can add a note node and include extra information for yourself or others who may use your workflows, but sometimes you just need short labels instead of long notes. If you have the RG3 node installed, you can use the label node. You can move it around freely, and if you right-click, go to Properties and change the font size. However, I prefer to open the Properties panel where I can adjust the font size and font color, either by using a color code or the color name. When you have text on multiple lines, you can also align it. The background of the label can be transparent, or you can choose a color for the background. This makes it easier to customize labels for clarity and organization in your workflow. Sometimes you don't need all the information from nodes. You set them once and forget about them. Do you see this gray dot on each node? If you click on it, you can collapse that node, making the workflow look cleaner. If you click it again, it will expand. You can also do this by right-clicking and choosing collapse, and you can expand it again using the right-click menu and selecting expand. This feature is useful for organizing your workflow and making it more compact, especially when dealing with complex setups. You know that you can select a node and use Control+C to copy that node, then Control+V to paste it. You can also hold Control and select multiple nodes, then copy and paste all of them. After that, if you hold Shift, you can move all those nodes at once. However, as you can see, some of the links are lost in the process. You may not need those links, especially if you want to connect them to other workflows. But if you want to keep the links from the original node after you copy the nodes, instead of using Control+V, use Control+Shift+V. This will paste the nodes and keep the links from the first node. Now, you can generate and get two images. You can change the key sampler settings to get two different variations. This is a helpful method for keeping node connections intact while making copies of nodes for different parts of your workflow. You should know by now that each PNG image you generate also contains the workflow used to generate it. So I can drag that image into ComfyUI and it will load the workflow for me with all the nodes, prompts, and settings that were used. This allows you to regenerate the exact same image or adjust the settings if you want. Now, sometimes this is true for things you or other people upload online, but some websites strip the metadata from the image. However, for example, Discord doesn't strip it. So if I go to one of my channels on Discord and someone uploaded a PNG image, it should have the workflow incorporated as long as it wasn't edited in Photoshop or saved in a different format. You can click on the image, then select Open in Browser. And from there, you can drag it into the tab where your ComfyUI is running. When you release it, it will open a new workflow tab with all the nodes and settings used to generate that image. This can be very useful, but if you don't want that behavior, you can either use a node that doesn't save the workflow, or you can just save the image as a JPG format using Photoshop or another tool. Let me try with a different image like this one. This one also contains the workflow, but it's missing some nodes that I don't have. You could go to the manager and click Install the Missing Nodes to install the nodes that are missing. Now, this doesn't guarantee the workflow will work perfectly. First, you need to have the same models, and you might have different dependencies installed, but at least you can get an idea of what nodes, prompts, and settings were used. When you have multiple workflows open, you can go to the one you want to keep, then select Close Other Tabs, so you are left with only the preferred workflow. For the next tip, I'll use a node that I used in episode 15, which you can install from the manager called iTools. From this node, I can add something like the line loader node, which allows you to add multiple prompts on different lines. Until now, when you dragged a link from other nodes, you couldn't connect it directly. But now a little dot appears under the clip field, which transforms the text into an input. So you can connect it. Let me undo that by converting it back to a widget. Before, we used to do this by converting the widget to input before we could link it. Now, you can just drag a link, and if it's possible, it will automatically convert the widget to an input so you can link it. For example, seed 0 is the first prompt, the cat. You can change it to increment, and it will take each prompt in order every time you run the workflow. So if I run the workflow now, it will take the cat. If I run it again, it will move to the second prompt, the dog, and so on. Alternatively, you can make it go automatically, change it to Q instant and run it. It will keep generating forever, cycling through all the prompts in a loop. It will not stop until you go back and select Q, and it finishes the last seed that was still working on. Sometimes when you've been working for a while, or if you have a lower end video card or multiple workflows open, the models can get stuck in memory. A restart of ComfyUI can fix that, but you can also try this button that says unload models. For example, right now my VRAM usage is at 37%, but if I click unload models, it goes down to 11%. So when you run a workflow, it will reload those models and the VRAM usage will go up again. Additionally, there are nodes you can add to your workflow that will clear VRAM after each run. This can help prevent VRAM from building up too much over time and keep things running smoothly. But it will also take more time because it needs to reload the model each time instead of having the model in memory. If your ComfyUI is updated, you should see this button here. When you click on it, it will open a panel that shows the information you would normally see in the command window, such as what models loaded, how much time it took, errors, and all kinds of useful information, especially when you encounter errors. Next to it, you have a button to hide the menu. Speaking of errors, if you go to the Manager and Custom Nodes Manager, you'll notice that each custom node has a blue title. If I click on one of those nodes, I can go to that node's GitHub page. There I can find more information about the node, what dependencies it needs, and maybe even some fixes for your errors. On the top left, you have a tab called Issues, where you can see all the open issues. If I search for something here, it will show any open issues that contain that word. Typically, you would write your error message here. If you still can't find it in the open issues, you can remove this filter, which searches only open issues, and then search for your error across all posted issues. You can click on one of those links and read the comments to see if anyone has found a solution. Alternatively, you can click on New Issue and post about your own issue. Also, on my free Discord server, besides the workflows, I have a channel called ComfyUI Frequently Asked Questions, where I add possible solutions to different errors people encounter when using some of the workflows. For example, some people recently had issues with nodes that couldn't be installed. In one of the posts on Discord, I uploaded a short video showing how to use the installer created by Ivo, which automatically installs ComfyUI and the nodes I use in my workflows. Some people had problems with crystals or the surge node because the node couldn't be installed due to different dependency requirements. So using this installer can help fix some of those issues. Sometimes when you open a workflow from someone else or from the internet, you may try to move the nodes around and find that you can't. For example, I try to move this node, but it doesn't work, while this one works just fine. This happens because the node is pinned. You can right click on it and select Unpin, and then you'll be able to move it around. Some people might hide other nodes behind these pinned nodes, so beginners can't easily see which nodes are used, or for other reasons, though I've never really understood why some people do that. You can also play around with ComfyUI's themes. You can toggle between dark or light themes from here. I'll leave it on dark for now. Then you can go to settings and search for appearance. In this section, you'll find the color palette where you can select light or solarized if you prefer. When I close it, you can see the colors here. Let's go back and see what other options we have. There are a few more dark themes, including Arc, Nord, and one called GitHub. Simply scroll down to reveal additional themes. Also, if you go to settings, it's not just ComfyUI that has settings here. Some nodes, like RG3, also have extra settings that you can change. For example, Crystools has some options that you can enable or disable from here. You also have the key binding section where you can see the shortcuts that are being used. From here, you can remove existing shortcuts or add your own. Then there's the About section where you can see more information about your ComfyUI version, what front end you're using, which Python version is installed, and other details that can be useful for troubleshooting or understanding your setup. If you have a portable ComfyUI setup like I do, and as I showed you in episode 1, that means you have this Python embedded folder. This means your Python is embedded here and it installs the right version it needs. It also installs its own environment so that ComfyUI can work without the need to install Python separately. While you're in this folder, you can go to the address bar, type cmd, and then press enter. This will open the command window in that exact same location, making it easier to run commands directly from there without having to navigate to the folder manually. The command python.exe-mpip list is used to display a list of all installed Python packages in the current environment. The python.exe runs Python, while the -m flag ensures that the pip module is executed within the correct Python environment. The list argument tells pip to show all installed packages, making it useful for checking dependencies or troubleshooting installation issues. You can also use a command with pip show to display information for a specific package instead of getting the entire list. This way, you can check on the custom nodes pages to see what packages they need, and upgrading or downgrading some of these packages might help fix the problem. I don't know too much about Python either, but I have ChatGPT to help out when needed, and it can assist with Python-related questions or troubleshooting from time to time. Since we already have Python installed, you can run Python code directly, as ComfyUI and the nodes contain a lot of Python code. You can also ask ChatGPT how to run certain Python scripts if you're not sure. For example, I can open a notepad file, paste the Python code into it, and then when I save it, I select all files instead of text documents. For the file name, I add the .py extension, as that's the format Python uses. I'll save it in the Python embedded folder so I don't have to look for it later. Now, if I open the command window in this folder, I can type python.exe followed by the file name, and it will show me the result of that code. Like you can see here, you can edit the code with Notepad, change something, and save it. When you run the code again, you'll see the updated result here. And with that, it looks like it's time to end this video. Thank you, Legends and VIPs, for your support on this channel, and everyone who helps by subscribing or sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing you new episodes each week. If you found some useful tips, please leave a like and a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. Thank you, have a great day, and I'll see you on Discord.